Hi, I'm Avram, Patt. I'm the General Manager of Washington Electric Co-op, and I'm going to talk about energy co-ops, mostly electric co-ops, but not limited to that. First, is anyone here a member of an electric co-op? If you live in the Northeast of this country, I'll tell you a little bit about co-ops, electric co-ops in general, but if you live in the Northeast, that's the part of the country that has the least amount of electric co-ops. There are 2 in Vermont. There are only 8 across all of New England and upstate New York. But electric co-ops nationally were formed, again, out of a need. And the need was that when people first started using and selling electricity, that was in this country in the late 1800s, in urban areas and in villages in Vermont where a dam located in the middle of the village would be built by often the municipality and would provide as much electricity as it would run lines out for as much electricity as that dam could produce. And then the investor-owned utilities started coming in a little bit later, and basically what happened in Vermont is what happened in the rest of the country. Investor-owned utilities wired and started serving towns and villages and the main travel corridors in the state of Vermont. But by around 1920, they basically stopped expanding. It made no business sense for them to go any further. Couldn't make any money. Their purpose was to make a profit. So they just stopped. And that repeated itself around the whole country. And in the New Deal era of the Roosevelt administration, one of the what I consider the great public works successes of the United States in our history was the formation of the Rural Electrification Administration to promote and lend money for the formation of rural electric co-ops, to extend lines so that people who had no electricity, a very large number of them, even more than today in Vermont, were farmers when most of the back hills were small farms, and that happened in the 1930s, in the late 1930s. As was mentioned right at the beginning, we're in the Aiken building. Right outside my office, which is a picture of Governor George Aiken in December of 1939, flipping the switch on 2 Caterpillar engines, which provided the first electricity for the first 200 farmers and other households in East Montpelier and Calais. And that building is still sort of part of the interior of our office building in East Montpelier. Nationally, there are 838 distribution co-ops. Those are the co-ops like ours that run lines to your homes and businesses and sell you electricity retail. And there are 67 much larger generation and transmission co-ops that are owned by many of those distribution co-ops, except in Vermont, because we don't have enough distribution co-ops to do that. Although it's not that big a deal in the Northeast, the electric co-ops nationally serve 42 million people in 47 states. They serve 12% of the population of the United States. And because by nature they are rural, they serve 12% of the population, but they own and operate 42% of the distribution lines and cover 75% of the nation's landmass. So if you're flying in an airplane out west and you look down and you realize you don't think you've seen any houses for about a half hour, that's a co-op territory. They have 70,000 employees nationally, and electric co-ops, probably more than any other sector, have been really good at building second-tier service co-ops. We're a member of the National Rural Utilities Cooperative Finance Corporation, which is a $22 billion highly rated financial institution that's a lender and provides other financial services to electric co-ops, which, as you might imagine, are very capital-intensive businesses. We're a member of the National Information Systems Cooperative, which provides all of the fully integrated IT systems for about 500 electric co-ops. And we get the economies of scale of a very large utility because they operate the mailroom that sends out our bills. They send out millions of bills a month. We have 11,000 members, but our unit cost of sending out the bill is that of a very, very large nonprofit, a not-for-profit company. And there are other co-ops, and like I mentioned, the generation and transmission co-ops, which serve states or regions. Typically, they might have from 15 to 40 co-ops in an area that they provide the power supply and some of the transmission for. So getting to Vermont, and by the way, these numbers are on a little handout if you want to take this home with you. There is Vermont Electric Co-op, which is based in Johnson. It's a regulated electric utility in Vermont. It was founded in 1938. It now has 34,000 members in 74 towns and 8 counties in Vermont. And when we say members in an electric co-op, we're talking about a meter is the membership. So that's a household or a business or a school or whatever. That's the member. They have $73 million in annual revenue, about 100 employees. And the important thing about Vermont Electric Co-op is that in 2004, they more than doubled their size with one fell swoop when they acquired the Vermont Territory of Citizens Utilities, which was an investor-owned electric utility, a bad actor that was about to be thrown out of the state. And so now their territory really kind of covers the whole northern tier of the state from Grand Isle all the way over to Canaan in the Northeast Kingdom, only interspersed by a few very small municipal utilities in their midst. Washington Electric Co-op is also a regulated electric utility. We were founded in 1939. We have 11,000 members in 41 towns in 3 counties, Washington, Orange, and Caledonia counties. We have Vermont's most rural territory. We have 8 meters per mile of line. 98% of those meters are residential. We have $15.3 million in annual revenue, and I would just point out that of that revenue, not all of it comes from our household members. 1.5 million to 2 million annually of that is revenue we get from renewable energy certificates from a couple of renewable energy facilities that we either own or buy from. We have 36 employees. We've been making capital credit, or what we call capital credit refunds, patronage refunds, since 1998. Vermont Electric Co-op is getting to the point where they will be starting to do that. And unlike most distribution co-ops in the country, we actually own and operate 2 generating plants, which is very unusual for a distribution co-op, especially a relatively small one. Since the 1980s, we've had a very small hydro plant at the Wrightsville Reservoir just north of Montpelier. And since 2005, we've been getting more than 2/3 of our power from a landfill methane plant that we built and that we operate at what is about to be the state's only landfill in Coventry up in the Canadian border. I wanted to also mention one other energy co-op, which is not an electric co-op in Vermont, and that's the Energy Co-op of Vermont. It's a more recent co-op. It was formed in 2000-2001. Its services are delivery of heating oil, kerosene, and wood pellets, as well as heating system service. It has 2,000 members in 5 counties, although not all of their products are available in all of their locations. It's, as you would imagine, a very transportation-dependent business. They have 5 million, and they are primarily operating in the northwest part of the state, in Chittenden County, Franklin, Grand Isle, in this part of the state. They have $5 million in annual revenue and 7 full-time and 3 part-time employees. So that's the energy co-op picture in Vermont. I also should add that in Vermont, the electric co-ops are regulated by the state, by the Public Service Board, in pretty much the same way as investor-owned and municipal utilities are regulated. If we want a rate increase, we have to get that approved at the Public Service Board, just like the Burlington Electric Department does, or Green Mountain Power. In most states, co-ops, because they're democratically governed, as well as municipal utilities, are not regulated in that way by the state on the premise that they have an elected board or a democratically appointed board, and they can make those decisions on their own. So we however operate in a regulated world.